Good evening, and welcome to the No Commercial Potential Show here on Cosmos Astrum Radio. I'm your host, Brad Wallace, and if you're tuning in for the first time, thanks for joining us. I'm happy to say that you found a very positive space here, because on this show we explore the lives of people from around the world, from all walks of life, and from throughout history, who had every reason to believe that their lives would not amount to much, but who are today household, even iconic names. In our first episode, we explored the life and works of the late great Frank Zappa, from whom the name of the show and of my fake band is derived. Early in his career, Zappa sent off samples of his work to various record companies, and one of them wrote back, returning his recordings, saying that while they were frankly in awe of his incredible musical ability and creativity, they sadly felt that his work had no commercial potential whatsoever. The No Commercial Potential banner, however, isn't just a clever band name or an event in one musician's life. It's a metaphor for everyone who took their best shot at greatness, and even just their best shot at goodness within their own lives, and were told, you can't do that, by people purportedly in the know about what can and cannot be done. So this show is about the people who faced down the naysayers, some of whom residing even in their own hearts, and if they didn't always realize their dreams during their lifetimes, left something lasting, beautiful, and important behind them for the rest of us.
We never mention the word addiction in certain company, and that's understandable. We can't talk about it just anywhere or anytime. You might not choose to bring it up at a job interview, for instance, but we too often avoid topics like mental health and addiction altogether because, well, they're just not all that comfy. And in the version of reality we presently inhabit, comfy is where it's at. So we tend to avoid such topics, even when they might directly apply to us. Perhaps especially because they apply directly to us. And that's not only a shame, it's a mistake. It's also dangerous. Because what we avoid, we don't see. And what we don't see, we can't hope to address, much less heal from. And addiction not only flattens lives, it ends them. In all this avoidance, the word addiction itself is often misused. We might even say abused in common parlance. Some worry about being addicted to a needed medication, for instance, a medication that brings only health and balance to the body and mind. But that's not addiction per se, just dependence. We might even say interdependence on something that's clearly helpful and dependable. Others might say they're absolutely addicted to the work of their favorite recording artist, but that's just enjoyment. Unless listening to that artist's music is somehow destroying their lives. And, well, the jury's still out on whether listening to some of mine might have that effect. In any case, the word addict comes from the Latin addictus, which means to devote, sacrifice, sell out, to abandon, to betray. Many in recovery know a saying, in addiction we give up everything for one thing. Addiction is literally that. The continuation in what is clearly harmful, even life-threatening, despite such harm, despite all the danger, no matter who it hurts and what it might cost. Doing the same thing over and over and over again, expecting a different result. In addiction, we give up everything for one thing. But in recovery, if we're lucky or blessed enough to encounter it, we give up that thing for everything. Tonight, I'm honored to sit down with independent recording artist and fellow traveler in recovery, Mike Allen. Unlike my two previous guests, Mark Grider of Fed by Sound and Leon Russell of Warm Rain, Mike Allen is not an old friend of mine through social media platform presently known as X. May the Twitter of bygone days rest in peace. In fact, a Twitter friend of mine, am I supposed to call him an ex-friend now? Anyway, a social media friend of mine suggested Mike and I get in touch, and I'm so very glad he did. Because Mike and I may not be old friends, but I think we're on track to becoming new ones. And more importantly, our introduction has given me an opportunity to not only shine a light on Mike Allen's music and other work, which you're going to be richer for hearing and hearing about, I promise, but to really activate the inspiration behind this program, to tell the stories of people from all walks of life who had every reason to believe that their lives might not amount to much, who faced down the naysayers, some of whom residing even in their own hearts, and who today have a voice. And the point of doing that is to inspire any of you who might be listening out there, and I emphasize the word might, to hold on, keep going, and to find and share your voice. Mike Allen is going to share his voice with us tonight in conversation and in song. And I'm especially looking forward to that because if I haven't been plain enough about it yet, Mike and I have something very important in common. Lives in recovery from the scourges of addiction. Mike's music, his life, and his works in progress shine a light on topics too often and too easily avoided in our time and place. And that's not the mission of this show, because what we avoid, we don't see. And what we don't see, we can't address, much less heal from. A majority of Mike Allen's lyrics center around issues of mental health and addiction. A recovering alcoholic himself, Mike recently wrote a book about his experience under the working title, Not Another Recovery Success Story. Or is it? Addiction almost claimed Mike Allen's life, and is something he says he's still not entirely certain how he ever beat. Music has always been therapy to him, though, and will likely continue to be just that, he says, until his dying day. He harbors no fantasies of superstardom, and admits he probably wouldn't know what to do with it if he ever attained it. But as with me, music has been his connection to the unknowable and to peace. We have something else in common here as well. As Mike puts it, if a handful of people enjoy what I do along the way, it will make me happier than any sum of money ever could. Playing music since the third grade, Mike Allen started out playing violin, graduating to the stand-up bass when his hands got too big. When he discovered Nine Inch Nails and Depeche Mode in middle school, Allen's life was forever changed. He learned to play bass guitar by playing along to old Metallica songs, then guitar by jamming out with The Cure. On exploring the music of Mike Allen, you won't find a one-trick pony, nor will you find a single easily discernible color scheme, any uniformity to the textures of musical sculptures he sets free, or a single, much less simple flavor presented to your terpsichorean palate. Definitely evoking reminiscences of the Nine Inch Nails and Depeche Mode, one finds so much more in the music of Mike Allen. To my ear, it captures the later work of David Bowie, Marilyn Manson, The Cure, Ministry, Rage Against the Machine, even at times Tangerine Dream. Listen to the work of Mike Allen, and you'll have what we in ancient times once called an entire record collection in one artist. For the younger set, a record was a flat, round, long play recording made of vinyl. You can Google it. Currently residing in Des Moines, Iowa, with his 2 guinea pigs and cleaning apartments to pay the rent, tonight's guest spends almost every free moment creating music. Yet another thing we have in common is a dream one day to write and record music for television and film. Tonight, it's my great good fortune to sit down with Mike Allen, spotlighting his life, his music, and his upcoming book. But first, an amuse-bouche for your musical palate. You're listening to Cosmos Astrum Radio, real radio for people who really listen. I'm your host, Brad Wallace, and this is a Depeche Mode cover song from the 2023 Variations album by tonight's guest, Mike Allen.
Take me to
was I Feel You, Mike Allen's incredible homage to the Depeche Mode classic. Without further ado, listeners, fellow citizens of the world, friends, I give you the one, the only, Mike Allen. Mike, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Brad. It's a real pleasure and a treat to be speaking with you. And thank you so much for that highly, what's the word I'm looking for? Undeserved, but much appreciated intro as to what I do with music.
Well, it's entirely sincere and well-deserved.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a real pleasure.
Well, the pleasure is mine, Mike. Thanks. Is there anybody you'd like to say hi to, especially out there then?
My girlfriend, Erica, I'm sure she'll, and a small handful of people that know what I'm doing and are listening. Hello to them as well.
That's great. I'm sure they're loving it. When did you first know you loved music and wanted to make it? How did that start for you?
Oh boy, that's a very, very early memory. I was actually having this conversation not that long ago with my mother, who was a music teacher her whole life.
Is that right?
In elementary school, it was just kind of that general music teacher, you know.
Sure.
You can remember Grades 1 through 6, you had 45 minutes of quote-unquote music class.
Right, yeah.
You know? And it was, so she did that for over 30 years. And so music was a part of my life since the very beginning. Some of my earliest memories are kind of crawling around on the floor while my mom played the piano and just being kind of fascinated by the sound, the reverb. And then I got a little older and started tinkering around with like how a piano is just built and just kind of looking back at the strings and just being fascinated by the whole thing. And that was my first introduction into just kind of the power of sound, you know. And then you add in the combination of notes, which you start to comprehend a little bit later in life, and it was just kind of, it drew me in like a moth to a flame. And it's been a real passion of mine, probably my one true passion for my whole life, the most consistent passion, let's say that. I've had other passions, some of them good, some of them not good, but this one, the music route is just something whether I like it or not, for better or for worse, it's just kind of part of who I am, and it's something I'll keep cracking along at, not because I'm looking for, like I said in the email, like superstardom or truckloads of cash, but it's just I don't really know any other way, you know.
I can relate on all levels to everything you just said, right back to the resonance and the mechanics of a piano. It began right there for me as well, in a church basement.
Yep.
Old, badly out of tune pianos from the 13th century or something.
Yep.
We started off, and we'll actually end off with cover songs of yours tonight. Not only as bookends, but because your most recent album, I believe, Variations, is an album of covers. I don't want to promote that, but others might be forgiven for thinking that recording cover songs is a relatively easy thing to do. But musician to musician, it's no small thing, is it? I released an album of covers myself just last year called Cover Up. And while it was fun playing other people's music, I felt a lot of things I didn't expect to feel. A kind of pressure, most notably, to record some well-known, well-loved songs and doing them justice while also not simply copying them. Did you feel that kind of pressure when you recorded Variations?
Most definitely. And the guy that masters my work, there's a Pet Shop Boys cover on my latest cover album, and he's kind of a diehard Pet Shop Boys fan, and so am I. And when I told him I was doing that, he just got kind of quiet and was like, wow, A, that's super old school, and B, kind of without saying it, kind of like a good luck in with that. So yeah, I mean, it's like the songs that I choose to cover are songs that mean a great deal to me. So they in that sense alone, yes, there's a lot of pressure to just do it justice, and in, you know, kind of in my wildest dreams, make it something that's at least as enjoyable as the original. I would never dream of being able to kind of replicate the magic of those songs that I covered, but there's a great deal of pressure. I try not to get too lost in that or too bothered by it. These are classic bands from a very classic era. So I think it's with that comes yes, indeed some pressure, and I'm pretty hard on myself, and I wouldn't probably release it if I didn't think it was, you know, if I thought it was garbage, it would go in the, you know, in the trash pretty quick. But again, I try not to get too hung up on that and just have some fun with it.
I agree. You know, and you know, there's no dint of hyperbole here. You've not only done justice to those that I've heard, but certainly put your own energetic stamp on them. So hats off. Clearly, these selections meant a lot to you. What does "I Feel You" mean to you? Why did you choose that one for variations?
A lot of the songs are kind of from my formative years, if you will.
Sure.
Like early teens to early 20s. Or at least they may not have been written and recorded during that time, but that's when I became aware of them and just kind of fell in love with them. And there's something pretty magical about that time in a person's life. And it's
Yes.
So I probably wouldn't just do any old song just to do it. It has to have meant kind of a great deal to me. And like "I Feel You," for instance, I can just vividly remember, you know, the video for it on MTV. For the younger generation, that was a channel on cable news on
Right.
cable that played music videos. But I think I was probably in middle school at the time that came out, and I'm the youngest of three kids, and I have an older brother, and basically whatever my older brother thought was cool, I had to think was cool, you know, because
Yet one more thing we have in common.
yeah, I wanted to be as cool as my big bro, you know.
Yep.
So I liked all the music he did, and like "Groove Is in the Heart," like you were mentioning today. This is just another classic song.
Yes.
Even if you're not a big fan of it, you've got to give it some credit for just being what it is, which is just groovy and just a catchy old tune, you know. But that was another one that, like, I remember my brother singing along to it in the car, and he was grooving out to it, and I'm like, instantly I loved it because my big brother did, you know.
Of course. Yep.
Just things like that.
Well, you're a one-man band, is that correct?
That's correct. Yep.
And I know you've played in bands before, but I think your whole catalog is just you.
Yeah, all the stuff that you'll find on Spotify that's from me is just me. My main stringed instruments are guitar and bass, and then I do a lot of synth programming and percussion programming. So that's a conversation for another time. But I've wondered, I don't know, the ethics, if you will, of basically making what sounds like a full band playing a song, but it's kind of reproduced sounds made in basically a drum program. And, you know, like I said, that's depending on either what side you're on of that. It's given me the, you know, the opportunity to actually create music by myself. You know, I don't really get out a lot. Frankly, I don't know a lot of people here in town, and I guess the older I get, the less appealing of, you know, playing in a band and playing live has become.
You know, you hit on everything. First of all, having heard some of your work, especially, if there is any kind of ethical debate around replicating the work of another performer, such as a drummer, I wouldn't say you should have any qualms about that. One thing that strikes me about your work is really how authentic sounding each instrument is, and even how melodic each instrument is, even the drum tracks. So I want to offer you that bit of
thank you.
Praise and encouragement, because you know, what you do is definitely art, and you don't require a band to do that, which is just fantastic in our time.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I've always kind of had my own reasons for never having recorded with other musicians. Why don't you at this point? Is it mainly just sort of the lack of access to people, or are you more comfortable working on your own?
It's a combination of the two. I would say the latter, though is the more prevalent issue. Right. I kind of reached a point 10-ish years ago where I just kind of had this realization that I don't think it was so much needing control over the whole process as it was I just wanted to just be kind of in my own head when it came to my music, and then
Sure.
And then that just kind of overtook my interests. Really, it was just I just kind of wanted to I just wanted to kind of delve deeper and only into my own head. And that's not that by no means is me speaking poorly of people that play in bands. It just so happens to be kind of where I landed, I guess. It was just becoming a little bit harder for me to play live, and I loved every show I ever played with the bands that I've been in. Don't take that the wrong way, but I think it was a combination of just getting a little bit older and kind of going into a little bit with the addiction stuff.
Sure.
My band basically only played in smoky bars, and
Right.
it ended up not being, I guess, the most ideal scene for me to be in. And that's not all that there is to it. Like I said, there was just some more. I just wanted, even outside that, I just kind of became aware of wanting to just do solo work, and it's like, it's funny, I've thought about this a lot, because like if people hear me on Spotify, as they would basically hear anyone on Spotify, they'd be like, I wonder if this guy's playing live anywhere. That's one in my situation. The answer to that question is no. I don't have a band. I couldn't go out and play this live. I could. It would take months of preparation. You know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean. I have the same problem. I played a few gigs for the first time in 20 years last summer, and had the very same problem. I could play maybe 3 of my own songs with just me and some guitars, but there's just too much other stuff going on that I couldn't orchestrate for a live performance electronically and all that.
Yes.
Plus, I hear you about getting older and playing live.
Yes.
It's tiring and it's hot.
Yep.
The audience doesn't know how damned hot those lights are on a stage.
Oh yeah.
It takes a lot out of you. Yeah, but
I've got some friends from back in those days that are at my age and some older that are still doing it just as much as they were 20 years ago, and hats off to them. Really, it's just like I said, there came a real clear point where I just wasn't as interested in that aspect of it. And maybe it'll return someday. I don't know, but it seems, like I said, it just seems to kind of wane, or at least it did for me. It seems to kind of wane with age. Just kind of the hustle and bustle of it, and loading all your equipment, and it's tiring. It's very tiring.
It is, especially when you're your own roadie, as many of us are, right? Yeah. I can't imagine even just people like Mick Jagger and Keith Richards being on stage at their age right now. It's got to be exhausting. They're just superhuman specimens to be able to do that.
I know.
Exactly. Well, every musician I know has their own process. I just kind of, in my case, hit record and play until something interesting starts happening. But sometimes it starts off with a riff, other times with a melody in my head without lyrics, other times with a lyrical idea or even just a feeling. Over time, the piece develops a kind of identity all its own, and ultimately it starts to grow hair on the back of its neck, as I like to say. What's your process often like?
Mine is very similar to what you just described. And I mentioned to you about the interview you did with Mark Grider. I was fascinated listening to the two of you discuss this process, because it was just like, it's like, man, I'm not the only one that does it that way. Because it's like, with the exception of, I think, 2 or 3 of my original songs going back 20 years ago, I've never had a song written from completion to end before I start recording it. That's just not how I go about it. Kind of like you, I bring up Pro Tools, I plug my guitar in, and with really no expectations whatsoever, I'm just like, I just put my hands on the fretboard, and
Mm-hmm.
I kind of let, I guess, what my mind is going through at the time kind of mold what goes through my hands. And it's like I said, I think the more common way of writing a song is perhaps sitting down with an acoustic guitar, and verse, chorus, middle, end. And you kind of have that established before you start recording. That couldn't be any further from how I do it. Like I'll for instance, the last track I just finished, I spent like countless hours just writing and recording basically the first 20 seconds of the song. Mm-hmm. And when I got done with that, I'm like, oh God, where do I even go with this from here?
Yeah.
Like I had kind of no clue what to even do with it. And all I had done is basically write the intro.
It's incredible, isn't it? I mean,
yeah.
I once spent 5 hours on 30 seconds of music, and it was maddening sometimes, but it's a glorious thing.
Yeah, it certainly is.
Well, yeah, I mean, like Mark Grider and I talked about in his music and Fed by Sound. I mean, I know he had his thoughts on it, but I likened it to the difference between an artist being an architect or a sculptor, and how in the one case they kind of meticulously plan things out in proportion and dimensions and all that beforehand, or just kind of roughing out the edges to reveal what was always there. That sounds a bit more the end of the spectrum that you're at. So we're going to be talking tonight, as my intro explained, about issues of mental health and addiction, issues that we have in common, and I think it's important to talk about openly so that more people out there might feel that much safer doing so for themselves.
Absolutely.
You've said that you spend every free waking moment making music. I reached a point in my journey where I had to recognize that making music itself had become a kind of addiction, or at least fed others for me. So I've taken an extended break from it. Has music ever felt like that to you?
Yes, most certainly it has. It can be all-consuming. As you well know, it's a highly focused process. It's one that doesn't leave much room for much else. So it's something that when I start to do, if, for instance, I know, okay, that song's done, I'm going to start working on another one, I have to have some kind of measurable break between those two separate processes, right, in order for life to happen. Just basic everyday life, like going to the grocery store, spending time with people that care about you. It's because when I'm in it, that's the only place that I am, for better or worse. Because it's like, and I kind of mean almost every single hour of the day. Even when I'm at my day job, I'll have it going through my head to the point of madness, and I'm like, the second I get home, I'm going to do this to that song, and that'll be the end of this part. So it's detrimental to my day job in the sense that I'm probably losing a little bit of productivity while I'm on the clock, because it's like I'm so hyper focused on this other thing. But the short answer to your question is yes. it's the level of intensity that I feel is required for me to do anything of value is astronomically high, and it's like I've said, it leaves basically no room for anything else. And it's however, the difference between me now and back when addiction was a much more prevalent force in my life, I have a much clearer head about me now. I'm able to kind of see the warning signs as I told you earlier today. Gib on Twitter, he and I have gotten pretty close, and there's a song that I wrote a few years ago. It's called the Invisible Ones. It's like an 8-minute song, and it was about a 3-month process of untold amount of hours, and this is just for one song. And I've only told and I've only told a couple people this, but it's like I knew that there had come a point within the production of that song where I had kind of lost touch with reality. So I'm much more, I guess, aware of my own ability to go to places that I shouldn't, and what it can do. So yeah, I mean, you can do anything to excess.
It's true.
Even if it's not hard drugs or alcohol, you can do anything to the point of madness. You really can. So it's just, while it is therapy, it can also kind of turn on a dime and become the opposite of therapy. It's it can take over your life, not unlike addiction.
Very
it may not be destroying your life or your body in the way that putting a needle in your arm or drinking a bottle of Jack Daniels does, but it's still very much in control, you know. So it's like I'm much more aware of I guess I just know, like, when I've been doing something for too long, and I know when to put it down now, whereas before I didn't. You know, there were plenty of times where, like, the sun would come up and set and I wouldn't even be aware of it.
Yes.
And it's like, this is, you know, okay, I've come a long way since those days, which is very good. But it's that level of obsession that I'm very careful to avoid now.
And that's the key. Yeah.
Yeah.
I get that. I really do. And thanks for that. Yeah. Well, the next song of yours we're going to hear is White Picket Misery from the Quiet Dignity album, also from 2023. Can you set that one up for us? What's it about for you? What was the inspiration?
Sure. I kind of became aware of the fact that the majority of my lyrics and inspiration, if not all of it, was coming from my own internal struggles. And I wanted to kind of, just in the interest of not repeating myself, I just kind of wanted to set my sights outward instead of inward. And it's kind of a critique on some aspects of modern society. Entitlement, narcissism, things like that are addressed in it. And I think I was just in a place where I was just kind of a little tired of hearing people complain that probably shouldn't be complaining. And or just don't know how good they have it.
Sure.
And
that's funny.
That was
I have one just like that called First World Blues.
Okay. Yeah.
It's the very same thing.
Yeah. It sounds like it's very similar, but that was kind of the inspiration for this one.
Awesome. Well, all right, friends. Once again, you're listening to the No Commercial Potential Show here on Cosmos Astrum Radio. I'm your host, Brad Wallace, here with tonight's guest, the multi-talented Mike Allen. And you're about to hear White Picket Misery.
Just that you want to be loved. Never forget that I'm the victim. An identity from which your worth will blossom. Strip me of this and I ain't got shit. I'll be the last one to know it. Your peace is inconsistent with mine, and your relevance inconvenience of mine. Don't you see this is what I stand for?
That was White Picket Misery from the Quiet Dignity album by Mike Allen. I'm in conversation with Mike tonight as we delve into his life, his music, and his lives in recovery. Mike, I'm awestruck by this one, specifically by how every instrument, as I said before, presents to me at least as so incredibly melodic. Again, even the drum tracks. There's nothing plainly just looped or repeated here to my ear anyway. Each track, as I listened to it, was almost its own song, worth its own time and attention. And I really value that.
Thank you.
Felt the weight in my life of a kind of White Picket Misery in the past. In fact, I've lived it. The sense that, oh my God, I've done this. I've locked myself in this nicely painted suburban cage. Help!
Yeah.
As songwriters, though, we usually write about what we know. Have you ever personally experienced that kind of life? And if not, has someone close to you lived it? Or was it kind of radical empathy on your part when you wrote this?
I'd say there's elements to both. There's some, you could classify it as some of it as radical empathy, but I've always been kind of aware of, like, when I'm writing lyrics that, could be, if you read them and took them literally, if some of the lyrics like seem like an attack on someone else's behavior, I'm writing about it from the point of view of somebody who's also displayed similar tendencies. If that makes any sense. It's like, I think everybody, just by being human being, is capable of whining a little too much, not knowing how good they have it, or just taking things for granted, or getting a little bit too caught up in themselves. So it's like, when I write songs like that one, like White Picket Misery, it's like there's always an element to it that I'm seeing some of myself in the issues that the lyrics are attacking. So it's I never want to write a song because I have an axe to grind, or it's just it's like there's lyrically, especially, it's kind of like, I don't think I would just go after somebody or a group of people. I might go after some of the behaviors that they display from time to time, but a lot of time, more often than not, it's written from a person who's aware of the fact that he's displayed similar misbehaviors, so it's
well, and there are misbehaviors that I think, what I'm hearing from you is a great deal of empathy and compassion, and it's the kind of phenomenon of our time and place, I think, that deserves a lot. I mean, we live, as you well know from what I've heard of your music, we live in a time where it's very much about self-comparison and getting ahead by wholly artificial standards, and all of this is encouraged. It's good and it's important, I think, that you've put yourself in that place, because even if we don't occupy it with all of the trappings, we're a part of this culture, and we can think what we want, but we can't want what we want in some important ways. So as people in recovery, we've clearly had a historical penchant for confusing wants and needs. And what feels good with what's good for us. Does any part of you, even the tiniest part, maybe long for the regularity and structure of some White Picket Misery?
No, I don't think I'm longing for White Picket Misery. That was a song almost entirely based around narcissism, and I think as addicts we don't see what we're doing in active addiction as narcissistic, but that's exactly what it is. So it's like like in that regards, I felt like I had some kind of dog in the fight. I felt like my words would hold some weight, because it's like, I know what it's like to only think about myself. I've lived that life, and I don't want to anymore. So it's interesting though to see how my lyrics have changed since coming out of that 2-decade-long fog of addiction. So you start to see the world in a completely different way. You really do. It's like
Yeah,
I'm not even the same guy. I'm just not. It's very difficult to explain.
It's astounding, though, isn't it? It's like they say in any program, we die to ourselves to come alive. And like me, you've had experiences in mental health and addiction, but are now gratefully a person in recovery. In the context of those experiences, was there a point when you felt certain that your life would never amount to much or might even be over? And what was that point? I guess in simpler terms, I'm asking if you would share a bit of your lived experience in rock bottom.
Yes, my rock bottom came in 2021, and I was living on a houseboat in Juneau, Alaska. My second wife left me for the same reason my first wife did, which was because I was an out-of-control alcoholic, and she didn't want to stick around for my self-destruction and everything that came along with that wonderful package. So she did what any sane person would do, and she left. And more power to her, because anyone in their right mind would have done the same thing. So it was, I think it was coming to the realization that I was getting divorced for a second time. I was unemployed. I was basically living on living off of a Roth IRA account that I had put away, and there came a point when I was clearly trying to drink myself to death. I was committing suicide without a gun, basically, because I didn't own one. Had I owned a gun, I might not be here today. But it was just, I had never seen such a rapid progression of the disease in my entire life. We're talking liters of alcohol a day. And a lot of it is a blur, which I'm sure you can imagine. With that amount of alcohol in your system, nothing is clear. But it's just, there was a point where I knew, not thought, but I knew that I was dying, and just kind of that realization just made me drink harder because I wanted to get the job done. And that was my rock bottom. And part of this book that I've been working on is me trying to figure out how was I able to pull myself out of that, because I'm still not entirely certain how I did it. But yeah, no, that was, I could get into some more gory details, but that was rock bottom for me. Literally trying to drink myself to death on a sinking houseboat in Juneau, Alaska. That was my rock bottom. Wow. And I was fortunate enough to still have some people in my life that hadn't given up on me, and really kind of helped me see that, if there are actually some other people in the world that don't want me to die, then maybe I shouldn't want to either, So, and it was a very beautiful moment, because people were coming out of the woodwork from my past that I thought I would kind of never hear from again, that were just saying, Mike, you have to get better. You have to do this. And like I said, it's difficult to even think back on. It was difficult to write that book and just kind of go back and write down everything that I actually could remember. And it's a lot, and it's gory, and it's not an easy read. But I think
it'll be all the more helpful for that, I'm sure.
Yeah, and as devastating and destructive as it was, I'm happy that I went through it, because the way that I look at life right now is I just have a clearer outlook on life, and I don't think that clearer outlook would exist had I not gone through that.
You must be acquainted with, the expression, the gift of desperation.
Yeah.
And I know without that, I wouldn't be alive today, and I do see it as a gift. But
When I finally asked for help, I imagined that having hit, rock bottom in quotes, I'd get into recovery and things. I didn't think I thought this way, but I did. I think I imagined that things might magically start to get better. To my surprise, though, and I've since learned I wasn't alone in this experience. Rock bottom, had several trap doors and sub basements in it, and I fell through them. Was your experience similar to that?
It definitely was, and I did a lot of writing about this, and it was just a lot of realizations that sure, you may have put the bottle down, but that's not a golden ticket to an easier life. It's not, and that's one thing that I became aware of and tried to avoid this time around. It's just like a lot of people can't get sober because as soon as they do, they realize that all the same things that were making them drink are still there. They're still there. They're not, and they're never going to go anywhere. So it's just all it's all about dropping every single aspect of the way that you used to think. It's like that's one of the ways that I phrased it was it's like the only way I was going to get better. It required the total annihilation of the ways in which I used to think. I could go into a lot more detail about it, but it's like at the end of the day, that really was what happened. I had to approach everything differently.
It evokes steps 6 and 7 of the 12-step program for me. What you're talking about right now, the
complete psychic change.
Yeah, and coming to believe that our character defect, we're becoming entirely ready for our defects of character to be removed, and humbly asking for to be removed.
Yep.
In my program, at least, I've come to understand that as identifying my character defects for one thing, but then where the rubber meets the road, consciously choosing my character assets.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, at least I'm being told that's when I'll be entirely ready for that to happen. And it's as you say, it's a rejection. It's an unlearning of everything you've learned before.
Yeah, and not
how to think
just
and feel.
Not just what you've learned, but also what you've just accepted as the norm.
Yes.
And it's like when you say things like where the rubber really meets the road, it's one thing to sit in a rehab facility for months on end and say, I'm going to do this when I get out. It's another thing to actually do that.
When you're under stress. Yeah.
Yeah. For me, like I think I said it in my email, a lot of my lyrics are about addiction and mental illness, but a lot of them are about identity too, where it's just like I became convinced very early on in life that I really wasn't worth a damn, and that was all of my own making. I had the most loving family anyone could ever hope to have. It was just I just never really thought that anything that I had to say had much value, and it was something that I just firmly believed in. I can't really say why that is, so I think kind of a natural way to address that is to just mimic people. Try and be one of the cool kids by acting and behaving and like them and doing and saying the things that they do. And so that kind of became, once I realized that was a huge part of my addiction issues, was the fact that I never really established who the hell I was. I just ran with everyone else's identity and just called it a day and hoped that would kind of suffice. So it's like
right.
That when I was, I started working on this book in my last stint in rehab, and when I kind of made that realization, I'm like, it's going back to you pointing out, where the rubber meets the road. It's like, okay, I've identified all these things for the first time. It's just like, I've never been me because that person has never had the opportunity to ever emerge. So it's like, okay, well, what do I know? What do I know is true about me? What are the things that I would say? What are the things that I wouldn't say? Like, I've, from a very early age, found myself kind of navigating my way through society just by being kind of a reflection of who was ever in front of me. That was
right.
just, that's kind of what I thought socializing was. It's just like, oh, just kind of become the person in front of you. And a lot of that, I think, was done to just kind of avoid conflict, which I've always had a big fear of. I think most people have that a little bit, maybe not to the extent I did, but
Sure.
mine was so severe that I would just become other people. I think it was subconscious for a long time. Then I became conscious of it, and then when I started putting two and two together, it's just like, this is exhausting. This routine that I have of doing this day in and day out is killing me. Perhaps as much, if not more so, than the drinking that I was doing to ease that exhaustion.
Right.
So it was like my one of the things that I knew that I had to do when I left that treatment center, and this is going to sound trivial, but to certain people it's not. One of the only things that I knew that I had to do to succeed was just be myself. Like, just don't say things you don't mean. Don't laugh at things you don't think aren't funny. Only speak when you have something to say.
Right.
Don't try to please everybody. Just see what it actually means to just be yourself. You know, and everyone just, it's the old saying, you know, just be yourself. It's like, for some people, that's just really not a walk in the park.
Well, when you don't know who that is, especially.
Yeah,
you know.
exactly. So, like I said, I just kind of had this realization that that's where a lot of my desire to stay numb was coming from. So it's like, was it easy when I finally got back out in the real world? Hell no. But it's still not. And I still find myself kind of avoiding people to just not put myself in situations I'd rather not be in. And socializing's always been kind of hard for me. But what I'm trying to do now is it's just like, if you wouldn't say this to somebody you're really close to, just try and be the same version of yourself that you are in front of this person as you are with this person.
Yes.
You know, it might not sound like a whole lot, but it's like that was kind of the crux of my addiction, was the fact that I was just trying desperately to be something I wasn't. And so yeah, it sounds good in theory, but boy, when you get out there and you start practicing it, it's tough, you know.
Yes.
But it'll be a work in progress probably the rest of my life. But it's like, I know there are more than just a few indicators that I'm doing better than I was. You know, it's just I feel like there's actually some semblance of an actual me now where there wasn't before, you know, and I think that's progress.
What are your top 3 indicators for progress then?
I'm just very cognizant of always being honest. Like that, like honesty, it could just be in very, very small situations. It could be in big situations. If somebody asks me, do you want to do this on this date? If I'll take a few seconds, ask myself, do I honestly want to do that? If the answer is no, I'll say no. Whereas before, I instantly would have said yes, because everyone's got to be pleased, even if it's at my own expense.
Yes.
You know, so it's like I just realized that I had to stop doing that. You know, and it's basically, it's kind of people-pleasing behavior, I think, is what that basically is. And it's one thing to identify it, it's a complete other thing to actually go out into the world and start practicing it. Because it's like, when you get used to kind of putting on this charade, which was basically my case, but like that's just how you talked to people, was basically by becoming them. It's like, okay, sure, I'm aware of the fact that that's what I was doing this whole time. Okay, great. Now go out and do something about it. And that was the biggest thing. So for me to be able to just kind of say, no, I don't want to do that, or yes, I want to do that, or just those things begin to add up after a while if they're not. If you're saying yes when you really mean no, or vice versa, your entire life, that's going to really start to drain you.
Sure, and it's resentment fuel and addiction fuel as a result, isn't it?
Precisely. Yeah.
One hell of a ride to something like sanity, isn't it?
Yeah.
I on that front, we talk about identity now, and I found out the hard way how far I had regressed in my thinking and emotional maturity in active addiction. Actually, I guess it was more like being frozen in time where my addictions began.
Yeah.
But it felt like a regression from where I believed I was as a person when I could finally see, especially emotionally, how emotionally mature that I've been. Was that your experience as well?
Yes. It's like I look back on my behaviors and they make me cringe, to the point of just keeping me up at night. The fact that the way that I used to act was just so normal and something that I was just accustomed to. It's very difficult to look back on and realize that was even remotely okay. It's a good thing, though, to be able to look back on it and realize that, and say to yourself, how the hell was that ever okay to me? Because that's an indicator of growth right there as well.
Yes.
And it's can serve as kind of further inspiration as how you never want to be again, because it's like, I look back on a large chunk of my life and just kind of shake my head in disgust. But having gotten to a point where I can look back on it and be so disgusted by it that it acts as kind of incentive to never be that way again. That's where I feel tremendously grateful to be able to be in a spot now where I am able to look back and be like, that was just awful. I never want to be like that again. I could be sitting here drinking and thinking that those behaviors are still okay, and the fact that I'm not is, again, an indicator of some kind of growth, and some progress, so it's
absolutely, it's almost like a fog lifting in time, isn't it? And it's beautiful in a way because you can see the sun and everything, but it also kind of lays bare the wreckage all around and the reality of where we've been and what we've done, which is rightfully horrifying. I mean, it's for me, as painful as it is at times, actually sitting in the feelings and recognizing the wrongs that I've done.
Yes.
With clarity is terribly important. Do you agree?
Mm-hmm. I do. Yeah, it's the number one killer of sobriety is sobriety itself, because it's only in sobriety that your head is finally clear enough to realize just what you had become. And it's that, I think it's that that's what drives most people, myself included, back to a place that they don't want to be, because once they start getting a clearer picture of what it was that they became and the things that they had done, they don't like that. I know I certainly don't. It hasn't made me relapse. It hasn't made me drink again. But and I try, with the exception of writing this book, I try not to dwell on it too much. However, never underestimate kind of the power of those memories, because they will serve as, there is no harsher, more stern teacher than your own memories. If you you don't want to spend too much time dwelling on the past. However, you shouldn't want to erase it either, because it's just like, that's where I was, and I can't think of a better reminder of where I don't want to be again than just thinking just a little ways back. So
well, it's like the book says, we no longer regret the past or seek to close the door on it, but you do need to face it, and that's part of the beauty of steps 4 and 5 in any of the programs I'm familiar with, which is the
the fearless and searching moral inventory of ourselves and sharing it out loud with another human being.
Mm-hmm.
And because it's important to face that in a way that's real and but also compassionate. But speaking of regressions of sorts, the next song we're going to hear tonight is a single of yours called "Competitive Regression." Can you set that one up for us?
Sure. This one is it's kind of politically tinged, and there's some elements of social critique in there as well. I think it came from kind of the idea of bad behaviors trying to outdo one another. It's like who can act the most disreputable, and it almost becomes like a competition. So that was kind of the basis of this one.
Fascinating. Well, with that, you're listening to the No Commercial Potential Show on Cosmos Astrum Radio. I'm your host, Brad Wallace, and this is Competitive Regression by tonight's guest, Mike Allen.
You won't get what I want you.
That was Competitive Regression by tonight's guest, the uber creative, uber talented, uber thoughtful Mike Allen. Mike, what was the sonic birthplace of Competitive Regression? Was it built around the keyboard line, or did it start elsewhere?
Again, kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier, you just kind of sit down and with a guitar or a bass and you just sort of see what happens. And that particular song, the rhythm is very simplistic. But that was kind of the point. I just wanted something that was just very driving and kind of groove oriented.
Yeah.
To basically just be kind of the foundation of at least the verses. And that was a fun one. And I think how it started, though, wasn't quite so simple. There was a moment where I was like, all right, that's too simple. So let's add some like piano that's in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And you're gonna think it's gonna be rhythmically based on that, but when everything else comes in, you'll be like, wait, what the hell happened there?
That was the exact response that I had. It was like, whoa. Yeah.
So I like messing around. I don't have a deep knowledge of like different time signatures, but I know them when I hear them, and that kind of trips my trigger. I like to kind of do things that aren't, always straight 4/4, just
Sure.
kind of throw, I guess, people for a loop, if you will.
Right. Yeah. Well, a little further along on that theme, you seem to have a number of vocal personae. Some angrier in a way, some more boyish. Oh, and this one, it struck me as something akin to John Lennon's at times.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Others heavily processed, and that's not a criticism. I appreciate the art form in that. I do that myself.
Mm-hmm.
Do all these voices represent different corners of your personality, or do you experience yourself differently when you use them?
I don't experience myself differently when I use the effects. However, I do kind of go into a different version of me when I sing. It's something that I don't particularly enjoy doing in front of other people. It's something that it's especially with singing, because you're using your whole body for it. It's like it's very much, I do kind of go into this different version of myself, and it's strange, especially when I have the effects on it that I like to use. It's like there are very few songs that I don't have a lot of effects on. I'll openly admit that. It's like I like distortion and chorus and a little bit of reverb on my vocals. It's just kind of a sound that I've over the years come to enjoy. So that's it's very rare to hear my voice unprocessed, but I guess the act of singing itself, especially when it comes to kind of conveying the message and the lyric through kind of the emotive process, I'd have a much harder time getting it to sound the way that it does if I went into a studio and did it with somebody else. So that's one of the things that I greatly appreciate about having, the ability to just record in my home, and I've got enough knowledge over the years to be able to do the production process myself, and not to mention it's a lot cheaper than going into a studio. If you can tackle that learning curve and learn a few basics of production, you're going to save yourself an untold amount of dollars.
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely. So it's
well, we talked about experiencing ourselves differently through different musical and vocal persona, and I share that experience along with so many. I have to tell you, Mike, talking with you tonight, it's almost like being at a meeting. That experience you have.
Yeah.
When you think that, well, that's me, that's not them, and then you hear something that's just so intimately familiar from somebody else. It's it's a wonderful thing.
I was thinking the same thing. I really was.
Well, when talking about these different personae, we experiencing ourselves differently while
say singing. When I was first releasing music as No Commercial Potential, I actually pretended to be a 5-person band.
Okay. Yeah.
My early videos and recordings actually credit them. The only credit I got was as their manager.
That's awesome.
They had personalities, they had senses of humor, specific dynamics. There was even an on-again, off-again romance between the drummer and the lead singer.
That's fantastic, man. That's great.
Yeah, but I mean, fantastic. But somebody clearly had skills in altered states of reality.
Yeah.
That's not surprising given what we have in common. I was wearing all these masks among many others. A lot of your lyrics center around mental health and addiction. So as a person in recovery, looking back, did you wear masks, and who were they?
Kind of going back to one thing we were talking about earlier is music, and diving into that process was kind of the one thing that I had where I didn't have to do that. Every other aspect, every other facet of life, I was pretending to be somebody I wasn't, and music was the one place where I didn't feel like I had to do that. And then alcohol is when that enters the mix, it just goes off the rails very quickly. In everyday life, in active addiction, the person that you saw, I was basically wearing everyone else's identity but mine. That was my life, and I didn't see anything wrong with that until I realized how exhausting it was, and how that was playing a key role in keeping me drunk. Kind of what my routine was. It was like I spent 16 hours of every day pretending to be everyone that came my way, and it was pissing me off, and I didn't realize it. But it was just making me extraordinarily unhappy. Would be an understatement. It was just like and the kicker of it is the fact that no one was asking me to do that. That was just something that was just a habit that I picked up on early in life and ran with it into adulthood, and didn't really see any issue with it until I realized that it was a key factor in my addiction.
Sure.
So you asked me what the masks were that I was wearing. It was literally everyone else. Anyone that I came in contact with, I just kind of felt the need to become them. And it was largely due to kind of my phobia of any kind of conflict whatsoever.
Sure.
The theory was, I guess, kind of if you become the person in front of you, you pick up their likes, their dislikes, their mannerisms, their beliefs. If you just become all of that, you're never going to disagree with them.
Right.
And you're never gonna have a conflicting point of view, and therefore avoid conflict. So it's kind of at the heart of my addiction was just my fear of any kind of uneasiness, and I as I'm explaining to you right now, I went to great lengths to avoid that at all costs. And by all costs, I mean all costs. It's like there was no room for me to really happen, because it was just what I knew. So that was my routine, 7 days a week, just kind of get up and, just basically become the people that came my way. And at the end of every single day was always this reward waiting for me for that ridiculous hard work that I was doing, maintaining all those different basically personas throughout the entire day. All of them, or none of them, me. So it was like I was doing all this at the expense of just kind of myself. And again, like I said, the kicker of it is the fact that I wasn't compelled by anyone to do this. This was just something that I've always kind of struggled in social situations, and there've been some indicators that I have what's now referred to as autism spectrum disorder, and that can make things very difficult, especially for somebody who's prone to addiction, because it's like once you kind of have that drug in your system, you don't really feel those kind of neuroses anymore. They're at least manageable. When when you've got that drug in your system. So it's like, it's another thing I write about is people on the spectrum, I think, might have a little more difficult time kind of giving it up. As soon as I'm one of those people that as soon as alcohol was in my system, I knew I had a problem with it. Like my first drink, I was like, there's something going on here, and it's it's way more profound than just getting a little tipsy and obnoxious with my pals. It's like, this is the version of myself that should have always been there. It just never has been until right now.
I can so relate. It's that, oh my God, I can't believe how this feels. I want more kind of.
Yeah. And
but you're right. There is a feeling of artificial kind of authenticity, though, in a way, isn't there? Yeah.
And for me, it was just off to the races very quickly. And I got to a point where I couldn't get it in my system fast enough. And, I graduated from beer to hard liquor straight out of the bottle within, months of my first drink, and it was, none of this was the result of peer pressure. None of it was the result of a troubled childhood. None of it was the result of neglect, abuse. None of the things that you so commonly hear about. From a very early age, I just knew that I had a very difficult time with people, and you introduce alcohol to somebody with all that going on, and it can go south very quickly, because it's like alcohol made me like everyone else. Something had eluded me my entire life. It's like, how do these people go about their daily lives and do this, that, and the other thing, and whether it be dating or commiserating or just the things that people do just in general life. It's just like the ability to do it had kind of always escaped me until
how do other humans seem to human so easily?
Yes, yeah. Some people some people know how to people, and some people just don't. And I was always one of those people that just never quite understood it. So alcohol and its social lubrication factor, it was just like, oh my God, it was like the greatest thing since sliced bread. I couldn't get enough of it. I wanted to feel that way all the time. And the rest, as they say, is history. And I spent, over 20 years battling that monster, and I'm in a place now that I never expected to be, which is A, alive, and B, no longer wanting that. I never, in my darkest days of drinking, I never could have fathomed getting to a point where I could honestly say to myself, I don't want this anymore. And I've reached that point. It's another thing I write about. It's like, every addicted person knows they need to be sober. How many of them actually want it, though?
Yes.
It's two entirely different things. That's needing it and wanting it.
Exactly. Yeah.
They're polar. They're not even in the same ballpark. No. Like I'd wager that most addicts know they need to be sober, but that has very little bearing on whether or not they actually want it. You have to want it. Like if you don't want it, you're all but destined to fail. Like it all has to start with an actual legitimate desire to not want to destroy yourself anymore.
Right. Yeah. And sadly, because of how the addict's brain or personality functions, I guess I can't speak for that. I'll speak for myself. In my own case, I had to lose almost everything that mattered before I could begin to learn anything.
Yeah.
And I'm as you said earlier, I'm grateful I was still remotely teachable at that, because not everybody is that lucky or blessed, depending on how we look at it. But I want to go back to something you were talking about before. A lot of us dream of coming through something remarkable, to use a word, something worth writing about, and writing a book about it. But you've actually done that. You've written a book titled "Not Another Recovery Success Story," or is it? What was that like for you? Was it harder than you expected it to be, or easier?
It was about as hard as I expected it to be, which I went into it knowing that it was like no single aspect of it was going to be easy. And I'll It's still kind of a work in progress. I've just begun the process of finding an agent and getting it sent out to publishers.
Oh, fantastic.
So it's but kind of like we briefly discussed in our text exchange earlier, it's like that's the kind of book that could just go on and on and on, not unlike working the steps of a program. You know, it's like it's one of the it's
That's
proving it's proving kind of difficult to reach a point where I'm like, okay, yeah, that's done now, because I feel like I have so much to say on it.
Sure.
So part of the challenge has been just kind of narrowing the scope of the message that I want to try to get out there. And so there are some points in there that I felt strongly about discussing, and my ultimate hope for it is that, kind of like with my music, somebody that was in, maybe, if I'm lucky, a handful of people that were in as dark a spot as I was in might read it and get a thing or two from it. Again, like I was saying, like with my music, I don't have some delusions that it's going to be like a #1 bestseller or something like that, but that's not really the point. I just I was basically at death's door, you know, and I'm not the first person to have been at death's door and survive it. So it's just like, okay, maybe this can be one of a handful of stories that gets into the right hands, and it might make people realize that A, they're not alone, and B, if this guy could do it, maybe I could too. So that's my ultimate hope for it. I've got a very long road ahead of me before this is either like on a shelf in Barnes & Noble or, you know, like a downloadable PDF on some site. So it's done, quote unquote, only in the sense that the messages that I would like to convey are there. Could I expound on them? Yes, absolutely, and probably will continue to do so until I have someone say, "Hey, let's run with this. I'd like to publish this." So I'll be tinkering, I'll be tweaking it, you know, here and there, and just, you know, like before we sat down to talk tonight, I was actually working on it a little bit, and
wonderful, yeah.
Because, you know, as I'm sure you know, especially in sobriety, you're just discovering new things about yourself every single day.
All the time, yeah.
You know, and it's just like, and I bet you're a lot like me when you start thinking like a human being again. Every one of those times that you think that way seems pretty profound.
Yes.
And you're just
how many
like,
times I've gone, oh.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And so it's been a fascinating process. The book starts off in the darkest spot imaginable, which was the rock bottom situation I was telling you about. And I did that for a reason. I didn't want to pull any punches, and I just wanted to say, hey, this is where your addiction could take you unchecked. And no, it's been quite a process, and I'm just grateful to be alive to even do it. So,
does the process of writing the book, I mean, you talk about how it's going to be a long time and there are fresh insights all coming regularly. Does the process in writing the book mirror any part of the program for you?
Yeah. Going back again to kind of our text exchanges, I didn't set out to do this initially, but what I realized maybe a month ago, maybe a month or two ago, was this book is a fearless moral inventory of myself. It's exactly what this is. Like, it was kind of like that holy crap moment where it was, it was just like, wait a minute, this is a fourth step. This whole book, because it's like that's exactly what I again, I didn't set out to do it like that, but that's exactly what it is. I looked at myself. I looked at my history. I didn't pull any punches. It was fearless. It was gritty. Nothing's embellished. It's exactly as it happened.
Wow.
But it is a fearless moral inventory of myself. So it's like, if anyone who has any knowledge of the program will probably pick up on that a lot quicker than I did. They're like, yeah, this is like this guy's fourth step, basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think they'll probably see that, because it's like, however, it's not just that, because it's like, I go into pretty great detail about, okay, this is what I did to address this. This is what I did to address that.
Oh, beautiful.
It's not just an inventory of myself. It's an inventory of myself followed by what I've done that has worked and what I've done that hasn't worked, in hopes, that yeah.
It sounds to me as though you're covering steps 4 through 12 with this project.
Maybe, perhaps it could be. It's our mutual friend Gib actually read an earlier version of it, and like I said, I'd love to have you take a peek at it. It goes over some. I'm always a little hesitant to share it with people that are actually in a program and have a really good thing going with it, because I kind of talk about some of my qualms with programs, with the whole recovery process.
Sure.
And however, it's something that I felt I had the right to talk about, because I know I'm not the only one with those qualms, the ones that I talk about in the book. And it's my hope was that it would at least open up some sort of healthy discussion about it. And again,
well, I'd be honored to take a look at it if you trust me with it. And I've anticipated that in a question that's coming a little later on. And I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts on what might be one qualm in particular, but I don't want to anticipate too far. I read once that before releasing the Jagged Little Pill album, Alanis Morissette sat down with her family to give them a heads up about some of the songs, because there was a lot about her family of origin in the music.
Okay.
Now, given the subject matter of your book, did you sit down with anyone and have that kind of talk so that nobody felt blindsided with information that may reflect on them in any way, or by any information maybe they didn't already know about you?
No, the gentleman that kind of acted as my editor is also a recovering addict as well, and I bounced a lot of these ideas off of him as well, and he shared some of my concerns, and he actually got to a point where, like I said, the first chapter is not easy to read, and he said, this might not have your desired outcome. This might be too much for somebody who was at least was in a similar position.
Mm-hmm.
But no, it's anybody that I've sent it to that I've known has some history of recovery or some history in step programs. I do kind of let them know, hey, this is discussed in here, and it's not always in the prettiest of lights. They're just my feelings, Yeah. I don't. It's but it's some people, and God bless them, really do live and die by step work, and it's saved untold millions of lives.
Right.
It's just I was never, unfortunately for me and only me, You know, I was just never one that it really took off with. It was always, it always felt a little forced. Aspects of it didn't seem genuine, but as discussed in the book, I'd say 99% of what I'm talking about had more to do with the people at those particular meetings than the actual program itself. I go out of my way to make that distinction. It's like, do I have any problems with AA in general? No, I don't. I think it's a unbelievable. I mean, the fact that it's basically all spelled out for you right there is pretty amazing. And if it's working for you, stick with it.
Yeah.
If it's saving your life, stick with it. But the point I try to make is that one size doesn't fit all sometimes. And
No, that's true. Yeah. Well, and the book itself acknowledges that, I think, toward the end, where Bill W. said something like, this is not the final word.
yeah,
And the principle of kind of take what you like and leave the rest, should be taken sincerely.
Mhm.
And I mean, I have in my family history 2 people, both alcoholics, one of whom was in AA and had a really difficult time remaining sober, and the other who quit drinking completely at a pivotal time in life and was never had a program. So there are I can't agree more, and really I think a clear reading of the AA program agrees with the sentiment that there are many ways, and
right.
and I applaud that philosophy.
Yeah.
Will your book have a dedication?
Yeah, I've thought about that, and it'll be dedicated to my family. We've had some real ups and downs. As he says, it's not easy being a family member of an addict. It just isn't. And to the people that reached out to me when I was basically on my way out, those are the people that definitely come to mind first. So,
well, on the theme of chronicling remarkable events, the next song of yours we're going to hear tonight is Remarkably Unremarkable. I love it. What's the central message of this one, and where did it come from for you?
That was, this is kind of the title, at least, and the lyrics as well, is it is sort of based in kind of that recovery mindset. It's when you come out of addiction and you've realized that you survived it, and you've kind of got your life back on track, and you're out functioning in the world again, which is something at my stage was something that I never thought I would ever achieve again. Just being clear-headed enough and alive enough to actually just go out and get a job, have an apartment, pay my bills on time, go to the grocery store, do the things that just normal people do. It might not seem very remarkable to some, but it is to me, because I thought that I'd never have that again. And that's what I'm referring to when I say remarkably unremarkable. It's just like, sure, it's like going about your life and the daily grind that might not seem very remarkable, but it's, or it might seem unremarkable. I guess I'm having a hard time kind of explaining this one, but it's sort of me. It was my kind of artistic way of saying the things that you take for granted actually are quite remarkable.
Yes.
It's that the album that is off of was the first album that I did once I'd gotten sober. And it tackles a lot of those identity issues. And the name of the album is E. Previn, and that's a shout out to a show called 6 Feet Under. I'm not sure if you're aware of that show.
I am, yeah.
Yeah. Emily Previn. I don't know if you remember how that show started, but it was always with somebody passing away, and it kind of delves into their life a little bit. And there was this woman named Emily Previn who was just kind of a shut-in. She went about her day and went to work, but she didn't have any close friends, and she didn't have any living relatives, and she lived what most people would just kind of assume was kind of a sad life. But then the point was made, well, what if that's what she wanted? And I felt kind of I felt like I could relate to that character, because that's kind of where I found myself in sobriety. It's like I have siblings that are estranged because of my addiction. My father's passed away, and I really alienated myself from a lot of people that I care about. And so it's just kind of realized that I was kind of this person that had done all these things to kind of land me where I was, and just kind of the acceptance of that. It's like, okay, I did this, this is the price that I'm paying, and now it's time to learn how to live with that. And so that's, I think, a lot of people, a lot of artists and bands and kind of have that. There's a lot of people that are in recovery. They have that, got a bunch of albums that they worked on while they were in active addiction, and then there's that one that comes out after they've gotten their life together.
Right.
So
yeah.
that song is from that album, and kind of delves into that.
Beautiful. Well, and with that, I'll pass. Listeners in recovery will get that, but for all the normies out there, it's what a person says when they're finished sharing at a 12-step meeting. You're listening to the No Commercial Potential Show on Cosmos Astrum Radio. I'm your host, Brad Wallace, and this is Mike Allen's Remarkably Unremarkable.
That was Remarkably Unremarkable by tonight's guest, the one, the only, Mike Allen. This is a very important episode. We're not only hearing about the life and work of a fantastic musician, soon to be a published author, but talking openly about topics too often swept under the rug, addiction and mental health. Mike and I sat down for a grand total of about 3.5 hours that night, and I can be a somewhat ruthless editor, but in this case, too much of what was said, especially by Mike, was too important to cut out. So I have made the well-considered, we might even say sober decision to split this episode into 2 parts. That being so, this represents the end of tonight's episode. I hope you've enjoyed it so far. I know I have. I apologize to my next guest, the fantastic Matt Martin, as our episode will have to wait until September 11th. But I'm so looking forward to sitting down with him to shine a light on his incredible work as an indie artist as well. For now, though, I'm going to leave you with Mike Allen's unforgettable cover of Groove is in the Heart, originally by Delight. It's been wonderful spending time with you all tonight. As always, thank you so much for listening. Circle back to us next week for part 2 of my sobering dialogue with Mike Allen, and for even more of his fantastic music. Until then, you've been listening to the No Commercial Potential Show here on Cosmos Astrum Radio, and this is your host, Brad Wallace, saying, hey, be careful out there.
Satisfaction when we're done, satisfaction of what's to come. I couldn't ask for another. No, I couldn't ask for another. Your groove, I do deeply dig. Walls don't need a bridge. My summer dish, my succotash wish. No, I couldn't ask for another. I couldn't ask for another. Just lovely and delicious. I couldn't ask for another. So I got a deal you wanna know. Delight